Hello YouTube, Travis here again. Alright, so today is going to be the one video that I clarify how to learn Japanese and erase all doubt. So this should be like the last video that I explain everything that I possibly can. And this is probably going to be like an hour-long video, 45 minutes, maybe around there. But I'm going to do the best I can to explain how I learn Japanese, how you can learn it, or you can use this method to essentially learn any language rather, but let's just get right into it. But, okay, so learning Japanese, first of all, let's state the obvious. And I've made this obvious before, but let's just state it again. Okay, if you've learned Japanese before, chances are you've heard of Japanese, and chances are you've heard of English. So, I mean, obviously, if you speak English, then you're obviously ahead of everybody else. Most people who want to learn Japanese, you'd be surprised. Like, learning English, you're just changing some things around that, you know, you wouldn't in Japanese, and then maybe memorizing stuff all over again, but essentially all the grammar laws are essentially the same thing. The only problem, the hardest part about learning Japanese, I mean, aside from just memorizing everything, and even that's easy, and believe me, this is really easy too, but this is probably like the hardest thing if I had to say it was one, but it's still, again, real easy, nothing you're going to have nightmares over and you're going to lose sleep over. I mean, unless you want to like really sit down and study this as soon as possible, and because you know the Asians, you know, when they learn Japanese, or the Japanese, they learn it their whole life, so this is the language they learn commonly. But I mean, realistically, when you sit down and you realize the grammar laws and you try to understand this for what it is, it's really the same thing, you know, for the most part, and it's really not that. It doesn't even take that much time to really even learn Japanese. I mean, I guess it depends on, you know, how fast you study it and how organized you are. But again, like, this is what I did, you know. Again, think of it like this. Three easy steps to learning any language. Words slash symbols, words, and then the grammar laws, like which order the words go in. And then if you can do that and memorize it, then believe me, you can just speak it fluently. You go up to somebody and speak Japanese real fluently to the point where they'll understand you. But the point is, though, sorry, I got so many too, but when you're learning Japanese, though, the most important thing to remember is what you're looking at. So, like again, the easiest way to tell if you are learning Japanese or how much you know of Japanese, this is what I did. I didn't even have a clue how I learned Japanese. Like how to learn it. But I do remember how I learned it, though. What I'm trying to say is, you really have to, what confuses people is how to make sense of it. But once you understand, I mean, the easiest way to get around that is just simply use Japanese sentences with subtitles, or, you know, like take anime, you know, undubbed anime. You know, there's a Japanese version, or maybe there's just an only Japanese version, unless somebody decided to redo it and they got the voice actors for it. But, you know, again, if that doesn't send up any copyright infringements, you know, hypothetically, let's just say. But, you know, unless the company decided to do it themselves, you know, it makes sense. You know, like, you know, I mean, obviously the video game industry has Japanese-only games. I mean, there's a game I'm playing right now. I have to look at the title, actually, but it was made by Compile Heart, and it was never localized. Like, I'm serious. Like, this is one of the greatest games I've ever played. And that's another thing. You know, not just video games, but I cannot tell you how many games I've played that were only released in Japan, and I had no clue what the story was, and I went back and replayed them, and recently I just know all the stories now because I know Japanese. And I can translate them into English just for people. I mean, it's really as simple as, you know, you read the sentences really carefully, and then you just, you know, you reword it. But along the same lines, you don't leave any details out, and you don't, like, kind of overthink it to the point where you're really mistranslating it, is what they refer to it as. But, you know, people in general would be very shocked that, you know, that's just what gets them when they learn Japanese. Like, you know, again, the words, they're just pronunciations. Like, I remember people saying that Japanese was like like, you know, like how they say French is the language of love. Well, I like to say that Japanese is the language of sounds, you know, just like any other thing. Like, it's essentially like, you know, it's based off like la, ra, you know, it's not just words, it's about pronunciation-wise. So, like, arigato, or konnichiwa, or hi, like, not like hi like in like hello, but hi as in like H-A-I. like for example, there are words in Japanese that they sound the same way, literally the same way in English. Like high, as in like high, like we're going higher, higher elevation. H-I-G-H would be how you would spell high in English. Not high as in like hello, but high like the elevation point. Now, learning English was not that hard for me. The grammar laws, however, might have got me every now and again. But after I paid attention to the word order and how the language itself was set up, it really wasn't that hard. Learning Japanese, I learned something. Every language is sort of similar. The only thing that's different is maybe a few things, but again, once you understand how to look at that and how to translate that, think of it like this. If you also know at least one language, all you have to do is just figure out, because again, letters, symbols, words, grammar, word order, that's it. Japanese, this is how it goes. You have to memorize what is known as hiragana, katakana, kanji, and then Romaji is just a way of writing it out, and then once you understand that, you can start spelling out words. Like, let me give you another example. I. Like, not like I, but like I. Hi. No, wait. No, how do you pronounce it? It's I. Like ha, like hi. Not like hi, like H-A-I, but like there's another one where if you just take the huh out, so it's like I, like AI, not like artificial intelligence AI abbreviation, but like I, as in like that love. So AI, so A is how you would say the letter A, and then E. So I. So it sounds weird at first, and believe me, it might even sound like a tongue twister to some people, because it's like, it's really the same, but I, in this case, is how you would say love, and that's, I mean, there's many ways of spelling it too, but but it's essentially the same thing though. My point is, when you sit down and you learn these language, it's pretty easy to memorize these words, and the pronunciations are pretty one way. Like for example, hiragana, katakana, and kanji, they're all the vowels are still, regardless of the language, they're still the same, with the exception of like some of the particles. They're really just, there's a few letters that might have two different pronunciations, but really it's because of people preferring. Like for example, there's a particle what is known as W-O or wo, but really they just pronounce it O, like ho. So like for example, every time you see a vowel, there's A, E, I, O, and U, but they pronounce A as in ha, as in father, E as in like as in pen, I, which is actually the double E sound from tree in English. Let's see, U would be going with the word Jupiter, so ooh, Jupiter, and you have what else was there? So ho, father. Yeah, that's pretty much all of them. So A, I, E, O, and A, and no I. You get what I'm saying. So also think of it like this: all the vowels in English, like the consonants, not like the lands, but the consonants. Oh my God, I always say that. Consonants and not like the land. Like the big lands that we live on, the 7 continents. Consonants, or how you say it, like, just so you have consonants and vowels. So every time you see a consonant in English, that like I'll give you an example, like T, it's still with the T, but without the ah in there. It'd be T, like silent. And then there's another, and then followed by a vowel. So like like you would have like words like chi or chu. Let me give you an example. Anyone familiar with the Pokemon series Pikachu? Pikachu is actually how you say Pikachu's name in Japanese. Pikachu. And that's 3 letters. So P-I-K-A-C-H-U. Pretty interesting, huh? But again, it's once you're willing to put all the time into memorizing all this, and believe me, it comes real easy when you understand how this language works. Learning Japanese is real easy. That's all you got to do. But the next question I know some people would probably be asking is, what's the fastest way to learn Japanese? Well, my friends, allow me to explain to you what I've been doing all this year. Now, I'm not sure if I actually mentioned I translate video games, but realistically, all you got to do is just go find examples of Japanese and make sense of it. You know, that's really all you got to do. So, like in Japanese, you know, just rewording, essentially. So, take a sentence, you know, again, the verb always goes at the end. And, you know, in English, the verb would go in the middle. Would always go in the middle. So, let me give you an example so you're not confused. There's subject, objective, and then verb. Now, in English, it's subject, verb, objective. Or subject, verb, objective, yeah. And in some cases, I've seen it go the opposite in Japanese. I've seen it go, most of the time, it's subject, objective, and then verb. But they could have it vice versa. Verb still goes at the end. Or they could have objective, subject, verb. So, for example, subject is who is the main focus of the noun, essentially. The what is the sentence about. The objective is what the subject is doing, and the verb describes how the subject is accomplishing the objective, if that makes sense. So, for example, and the sentence I've always stuck with, plain and simple, let's just say Travis was going to the store. Okay, in English, that would be Travis was going to the store. Okay, so in Japanese, they might take out a few words, and they could say, like, for example, aside from the Japanese, you know, the words in Japanese, I'll just give it to you, like, with the words in English, but with the word order the same in Japanese. So, like, for example, you know, let's just say it was subject, objective, verb. Okay, so we would say Travis, the store, went. Okay, Travis is the subject, the store is the objective, and went is, you know, the subject, or the verb. Yeah, I know it's a little bit confusing, but, you know, again, if you have a good, clear mind and concentration, you can pretty much make sense of this real easily. And, okay, so in Japanese, though, where did that spider go? There's a spider under this table. But anyways, you know, yeah, okay. So, but if we were to go vice versa, let's say the store, Travis went. It's possible that, you know, that would be objective, subject, verb. Now, again, if you know words in Japanese, then it shouldn't be too hard to rearrange it. Not to mention, you know, if you're translating it into English, for the most part, chances are you're probably going to reword it. So if that is the case, or maybe the words are all there, but you just got to rearrange, meaning you just switch them around. That's it. That's all there is to it. Like, I mean, again, when you read something in Japanese, there's two things that you might be confused by: what the words actually translate to, and the word order. So, like, for example, if you know Japanese, like, you know, maybe you're trying to put this in English, but maybe it's missing a few words. Maybe you got to add a few things to make it sound right. You know, I can tell you for a fact, like, there was a woman by the name of, and I recommend you look up this woman if you don't know who she is. There's a woman by the name of, I'm trying to think of her last, I want to say her first name is Akiko, so A-K-I-K-O, and her last name is Hasegawa, which is H-A-S-E-G-A-W-A. She's got a really beautiful voice. I always love her music. There was a video game series by the name, it's called a Criminal Girl series, for example. If you've ever played Disgaea for the, she's done a lot of other things. She's done anime, she's done Japanese anime and video games. But if you remember, like Disgaea 3, Afternoon of Detention or something like that, or Absence of Detention, or absence of not abstinence, but I mean like absence, like, you know, like it's missing of justice. There is a, you know, there was a woman by the name of Sapphire. She was the only woman in, she was like a very beautiful young fictional character. She had like this very long blonde hair. She had this really, pretty blue dress, and she attacked with guns and all that, and she was a princess from another faraway land, and eventually she married the wannabe hero. I'm trying to think of what his name was. Not Mo, but you essentially team up with him. He's like the first character you recruit that's a human, and eventually you find out they get married and they come back from their honeymoon. I mean, this is just in the game story. But if you turn on the Japanese voice acting for Sapphire, that Akiko did the Japanese voice acting for her. So what does this have to do with Japanese? Well, I recommend that you go listen to some of her songs, because she is a very good example. No, she's a perfect example of a woman that if it wasn't for like certain games getting localized, you would never even know this woman even existed. I swear, it's perfect example that like over where I live in the United States. Over where Japan is, the current time zone, I'm not sure if they set their clocks forward or back, but as of right now, they're 15 hours ahead of mine. So, for example, it is 8:12 p.m. It is officially 10 or 11 p.m. or a.m. over where they live. 11, 12, 11, 13 over where they are, or 10, 11, 10, 12. So 14, 15 hour difference. Mostly 14 hours, but if my clocks are set back, then it's 15 hours. But my point, what does this have to do with Japanese though? It's obviously a different country. It's on the other side of the world. So obviously, Japan's got stuff that they never localize. I mean, maybe for good reason, maybe not. Again, let me give you another example. Tales of Rebirth. There's so many games out there. I mean, it doesn't even just have to be about video games. It could just be a question that you ask, though. You ask yourself, what goes on in that culture? More or less, because I'm not from it. I've always wanted to go to Japan. I've always wanted to go to Asia. Because, they do stuff differently. And they come up with some really cool stuff. And if people don't know about the stuff, then it's like, only the people that have seen it would even know. So, I love their culture. But at the same time, though, it's like, if you and I were to sit down and talk about, like, what goes on over there, unless we had a clue, people wouldn't know. There's a lot of stuff over there that goes on over there that a lot of people look, and they say, they come up with that stuff? Yeah, they do. I'll give you another example, and this is just the same thing, but just the idea behind it is, I've seen some Japanese animes that I've never even heard of. Like, for example, I never would have known about Standing Alone Complex. There was a woman by the name of, oh God, I can't even remember her name now. She passed away of lung cancer as of earlier this year. She was, standing alone. I'm just resetting an episode on my DVR. I've got my camera on it, and I'm just sitting here on the floor. But my point is, I'm just saying, if you keep hearing click noises every now and then, if you see my hand like adjusting, that's essentially what I'm doing. But my point is, though, I can't tell you how many people that I've seen do that, though. Like, for example, if you needed an example to learn Japanese, go look at their culture. Like, not even just Japan, but just all of Asia. And those are other Japanese cultures too. But that's the hardest part about learning Japanese to some people, because they've never learned it before. Some people, they say, oh man, I love this culture. They just get this really, how like sometimes like you're really excited about something, and it's not just something that you can easily sit down and forget. It'd be like a kid in a candy store, somebody who's like going crazy for this stuff, like they have to have this, and they will not rest until they do. That's exactly how I feel about Asia. It's something you love. It's because of how they do these kind of things. It's not just, again, it's not just the animes, it's not just the video games, it's the whole culture. It's like Asia is a place where they're really nice people, and at the same time, though, they're like these really hard workers. Like they accept people for who they are. And more or less important, they have fun with what they do. Yeah, every culture is the same way, but I don't know what it is about Asia. It hit me the hardest. Like, I looked at it, I'm like, wow, they really do this stuff. And I love it even more because I've never seen this stuff before. So it affects foreigners. Well, to them, who's a foreigner? I'd be a foreigner to them because I'm not from Japan. But like, let me give you an example, though. I played Criminal Girls for the PSP. The game was re-released for the PS Vita. And, I mean, it's a game that has, it's more for a mature audience. It's not just something you let your kids play, unless, of course, you want them to. But my point is, it wasn't for the sexuality or anything like that, but it was rather, I mean, I love the music, I love the story. And it's something I would expect Japan to come out with. Like for example, there's one part in particular. There's this, it's called the school, it's called some classroom, and then it says comma, and memory at 16 o'clock, and it takes all the characters that are repenting for their sins, and they show, like, I mean, eventually, this is when you really learn, like, all the characters in the game, because, like, all of them are female, at least. But the PS Vita version has, like, all the extra stuff in it. They didn't really, like, the game came out in 2010, and then later on they re-released it in the PS Vita. And this is at the time when I didn't even think the game was even getting localized, and come to find out it did. It got censored, though, but, nonetheless, when you got to this part, though, of the game, like, the whole game itself was, it was something you really could learn something from, and it really struck me because, I mean, like, I've never played a game, like, I mean, I've played games that were emotional to me, but I've never played a game that, like, at least in a while, like, I mean, it didn't hit me like that one, though. It was like, you go through this whole level and you listen to this music. Here's another thing about Japan, and I'm sure anybody who's from Japan will tell you the same thing. One of the more common repeated things that they do in Japanese is that they have, like, their characters are in school of some kind. Like, for example, Bleach. It's a really long anime. It's been running for almost, like, what is it, like almost 10 years or something like that. I don't know exactly how long it's been. 10, 15 years almost. But anyone who's a huge fan of Bleach, and believe me, I've watched Bleach several times. But it's been a while, though, I mean, I watch it every Saturday, too, but I mean, once a week, though. I mean, some people, they'd rather go on the internet and find those episodes. I mean, not through piracy, but I mean, rather, in a way that they can just go on, like, maybe Amazon, for example, and buy the actual DVD, the Blu-ray, and say, I have the whole season, I can watch it anytime I want, Japanese dubs, English dubs, because they're really cheap if you know where to look. And I can even help you out, too, if you want. But my point is, you would not know that this stuff exists. You would not feel the way I do about some of these languages if you never took the time to even know that it exists. I mean, to you might think it's just another culture. But let me tell you something. Being someone who was never from Asia, and they really were heavily inspired by their language, I mean, it only made sense to want to learn the language. And this is, and again, I know this is all just my personal experience, but the reason I am bringing this up is because, like, these memories are literally, like, this is why I'm here on the internet. I want people to know that this stuff exists. I want people to support these people. I mean, not just other cultures. I mean, not just this culture, but like other cultures too. There's always something out there people don't know, and there's always something out there that, if you could just show people that this, at least acknowledge that this stuff exists. That's why people will appreciate, like Japan and Asia. I mean, I know a lot of people do, and maybe sometimes they don't come up with the best stuff, but I mean, I still appreciate them for what they do because they know how to pass the time. They know how to, they know how to set everything right. When you sit down and you, like again, you play the Japanese video games, you're going to be entertained. They put a lot of time and effort into those games. So, I mean, I played a lot. I couldn't tell you. There's a lot of games that were low budget, for example, and it was really freaking long. Like, I mean, there's some, sorry if that offends anybody. I don't mean to offend anybody by any sort of. But my point is, I'm just trying to put emphasis on this. Like, I mean, it's like, there are games out there that are like, they're never released outside Japan, no one's translated in English, not the fans either. I mean, like, I'll give you another example. If it wasn't for GameFAQs, I never would have found this game. Here's another game that I would recommend. I haven't really played it all the way through yet because I want to do a full walkthrough of it, but I'm still trying to learn the game a little bit more because it's a little bit different than anything I've played before. Again, Japan just does that. There's a game called Abarenbou, which is spelled Abarenbou, Abarenbou, Princess. And it's not really what the name implies. A barimbo in Japanese stands for rowdy, more commonly rowdy or reckless. I always thought it was reckless princess. But just to kind of give you the name in a nutshell, and I'm going to do a walkthrough on YouTube. There's actually no videos on YouTube of this game right now, and well, except for one part, but they didn't really finish uploading the rest of it. A barimbo princess is a game where you play as an 18-year-old princess in the Silver Bell Kingdom by the name of Rue. I'm trying to think of what her last name is, but it's been a while since I've looked at it. You can find this on the internet. I mean, there's a couple websites that were actually like almost 10 years old that people blogged about this game. The game was one of the first PS2 games, and it's obviously starts with an A, so it's going to be one of the first games that comes up. But it was one of the first games. I mean, because again, GameFAQs has like the complete list of all these games that come out, like games that were never released. I mean, it's just really, really well organized, I should say. And again, I never would have known that this game existed if it hadn't been for GameFAQs. But why does that matter though? Why am I bringing this up? Because again, Asia does their own thing. Japan does their own thing. That was something that somebody made over in Japan. And, if you love Asia, then it makes sense to, explore their culture. And, what better timing that could have been than to play something like that has never been released outside of Japan. And, I mean, it's a fun game. It is. It's a lot different, though. But it's, I mean, not like different like you won't get into it. But, I mean, it's like, it's a game that's really interesting, though. You talk about these fictional characters, and, again, I actually thought this was pretty interesting, but the woman that does the Japanese voice acting for Rue, she actually was voiced by the same woman that did Sailor Moon, the Japanese voice acting for her. So I didn't know that, actually, until I looked it up. I knew the name sounded familiar, and the game actually came out in 2001. Sailor Moon came out in, like, the early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. It's been so long since I've seen it, but, I'm sure people remember Sailor Moon. It's like on the same level of popularity as Dragon Ball Z was, but I think Dragon Ball Z was a lot better in people's opinion. Sailor Moon was awesome too, but Dragon Ball Z, man, you couldn't go wrong with Dragon Ball Z. That was something. I mean, even though that was localized and so was Sailor Moon, but people said the English localization wasn't the best. But Dragon Ball Z, I'm trying to think of who it was. Akira. Yeah, it was Akira. Was it Toyomato or something like that? I forget his last name, but it was. I could have sworn it started with a T. When he came up with the Dragon Ball Z series, I mean, literally, people went crazy over that, and they still do to this day. And that was one of the major reasons why Chrono Trigger, even though that game was also localized outside Japan, people went crazy for that game, and people still do go crazy for that game. My point is, there are examples of things that Japan makes that people should know about if they have never seen it before. So obviously the only way to do it is to learn Japanese. And even more further, there's some games out there that were never localized outside Japan and no one's translated them. Now, if you were to type the game in Japanese and put it on YouTube, you probably might get some different results. I'm sure you could probably find, like again, a barimbo princess, if I were to put the name in Japanese, and even find websites that I never even knew existed. Because again, that's kind of, it's like that. You gotta go on the internet and you gotta find it. But the only way to find it is to do a search. But you gotta know it's there though. And you gotta translate it right too. That's how I found some websites. Not bad ones, but good ones though. That's how I found some of these video games. Never would have known it existed if I hadn't known that it was already. And again, let me give you another example. Yeah, think of all the consoles that we play, like the PS1, the PS2, the PS3, the PS4, the Xbox 360, the Xbox One, Nintendo, like all the consoles Nintendo comes out with, the iPhones, there's consoles that are actually really good that were never localized outside Japan or Asia, and they have a fair amount, like maybe 500 to like maybe 17,000 games, like the PS2 has, or somewhere around there. Like really good games that were never localized outside of specific regions. That even GameFAQs doesn't even have on this. No, like American website or US website has these games listed that they exist, and they could be a good 100 hours long. And I mean, it would literally be an example of like you could make like a top 10 list on YouTube, like 10 of the greatest games that you'll probably never play in your life. And you might wonder, why do people make? Because like for example, there's a guy on YouTube. His name is Danger Dolan. Now, I like his channel. I do. I really do like the fact that these people, like, there's people out there that they'll make video game commentaries about like a certain subject, and I actually found that interesting. You know, that was a really cool video that he made. 10, I think it was 10, or if he did 17 of them, like 10 really cool games that you'll probably never play in your life, just simply, or you'll never play in your life because you could never get your hands on them. First of all, you'd have to import this console, and second, you would even have to know it exists. Well, most importantly, you'd have to know it exists, and second of all, you'd have to get your hands on it. And maybe it was expensive, maybe it was rare, maybe it was on the internet, but it was only under like a Chinese torrented website, or a website that was only in Chinese or Japan. And I'm not saying you couldn't go on it, but it's like, first of all, you'd have to know it exists, and then second, you'd have to go on there, and personally, I would try to buy it if you can. Again, don't pirate things. I mean, I don't, but yeah, I know some people probably think I'm crazy for saying that, but what I'm saying is, just support the game designers. As long as they're not losing their money, I'm sure no one's going to care. That's what I'm saying. Just support the companies. They deserve it. My point is, though, if you think about what's out there, though, learning Japanese, the language itself is the heart and soul and the body of Japan. If you don't know Japanese, it's not the full experience. You need to know the language in order to make progress. You need to sit down and figure it out. Because once you do figure it out, and believe me, all the things that I told you, that should be clear enough indication that, why I did it. And it's real easy. Just take Japanese examples and just abuse them. Just figure out the word order, what it translates to, rearrange the words, and if you have to add some more, you probably won't have to. And there you go. It's in English. I can't tell you how many, with that just simple technique, I took songs that I've never even heard in Japanese, and I pretty much created my own English translations that were accurate. Like, for example, there was a song by the name of, and I recommend you subscribe to this band too. You might remember Star Ocean for the PSP. First Departure. There's a song called Heart. Not like, I don't think it's like heart is in love, but like heart is in like traveling through the universe and the heart of the universe. Something like that. Exploration, essentially. So it's a male band. There's nothing wrong with that. But anyways, what it is they made the band's called Asunaro. So Asunaro. So Asunaro. And what they did was, they got together, they wrote a couple, I mean, I'm sure they wrote more than just a couple songs, but I mean, Heart, though, whether it was in Japanese. And this is another thing I just want to throw out there. Sometimes you can play games or animes, and you'll notice that sometimes they have the words just flat out in English. There's even like Akiko Hasegawa. Some of her songs, like I Can Fly, just literally I Can Fly in Japanese, and some of her lyrics, like in some of her songs, literally like they're in English. Like Heaven or Hell, there's like one part where she says Heaven or Hell, or please don't destroy precious shiny treasure, or please don't disturb precious world, precious little things. And it's in English. And then the next sentence after that would be entirely in Japanese. Now, I could never understand why why in Japanese sometimes they do that. But it's a lot easier. And not to mention the game that I'm playing right now, they have like certain parts that are in English. Like the whole, like if you open up the menu, it's got like the hiragana, the katakana, and the kanji. But it's got what it translates to right in it. So like it goes status, items, equipment, quest, and it's literally spelled the same way in English that it would in Japanese. Why they do that, I don't know. You know, it's actually really interesting. You know, because think of it like this: the Japanese, for the most part, they don't just know Japanese. For the most part, there are people in the Japanese community that actually know English and a lot of other languages. I actually met a foreigner who actually knew more about this country than most people knew about their own country. And I tried to know more than he did, but he was just smart about it. And, I mean, he was smart, man. That's why I love Asia, man. I love the Asians for that. They're smart people. I mean, I don't care what anyone says about it. You know, you can call me a weeaboo. You can say all these bad things. But let me tell you something, though. You know, those people are smart. They should be respected. And I definitely agree with them when they say that, you know, that you can do anything. You know, don't be afraid of who you are, and don't let other people stop you. Because let me tell you something, though. You know, making fun of people, it ain't cool. There's people out there that have proven anything is possible just because they simply believed in a simple concept. I could literally go from being somebody who absolutely knows nothing about Japanese, and I'm an outsider, and I could know more about Japanese and I could teach people it. And the Asians would probably be very happy knowing that there's people out there that do appreciate their culture, and they're not trying to do it like in a sense that they're being a jerk with it, like mocking them, or you know what I mean? So my point is, Japanese is really not that hard to learn. Just wrapping this all up. If you want to learn Japanese, you can always ask me or anybody who knows the language. But the most important thing that I recommend you do is use nothing but Japanese examples that haven't been translated, or play games that are in Japanese and try and figure them out without using a walkthrough, or maybe use a walkthrough at the same time though. But like, pay really close attention to the way they pronounce the words, because eventually it starts to click in your mind and you'll be like, oh, that's how that works. Even though again, it's a lot easier to read in Japanese than it is English. For example, the game that I'm playing, it's in English. Like literally, it's in English almost, and it wasn't localized. And I'm even translating the game too, so I'm even translating in English. It's like, you know, it's really that cool. You know, you just got to understand what you're looking at, and you just got to be able to make it work somehow. That's the only reason why people are confused by it, because you know it has not been translated yet, and the people that have tried to learn it or want to learn it, they can't do it yet because they don't understand that concept. But once you do, it's real easy. You know, so that's really it. You know, so comment, rate, subscribe, favorite, share this video, and hopefully, you know, that makes sense. If you have any questions, just let me know.